So I guess I want to first take it back to just a quick overview of your humble beginnings and really then when you guys intersect in your timeline to form Mockingbird and to start working together to take us to where we are today. How did you find producing? Like, how did you find that that was a thing one could
Well,
do?
Mockingbird already existed when I found Julie.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, come on, let's face it, it's the most interesting part of the story, right, Jules?
No,
Uh,
I mean, I think she's going to want to start with your 15 years with Steven Spielberg. That's always really what people mostly want to talk about.
um,
Well, and how you
I
go from sorry, and how you go from being a First Amendment lawyer to pivoting into producing.
And
All of it is quite fascinating, really.
Bonnie is the fun one, I promise you.
you'll never
I'm like
convince you'll
Gracie.
well, you're like Gracie to my George,
Yeah.
but it's all about Gracie. Come on, it's all about Gracie. Um, and I don't like cigars. Um, I mean, we can both sort of tell you sort of a snippet of our lives before each other. Although it's like every time I ask my wife, well, what about that girlfriend or that girlfriend? And she's always like, there were no people before you, honey. Like she won't even discuss it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which has proven to be very wise, I think. I always knew I wanted to work in film. It was just never from the time I was like, I mean, even before I was 10 years old, but I have a specific film memory at age 10 where I was running around telling my mom and dad and brother and anyone who would listen that I wanted to make movies. And I was watching the Academy Awards, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was nominated for like 87 Oscars. And they were winning all of them. And in each, these individuals kept standing up and going forward. And it was like production design and, makeup and wardrobe. And I'm 10 and I'm trying to connect. Wait a minute, is this a job? Like,
Mm.
is this, wait a minute, I just thought these movies were like magic, and you'd walk into a movie theater and you were just like, oh my God, I can't believe someone did this for me. And we'd been going to movies since I was like 4 or 5 years old. I remember seeing Sleeping Beauty on the big screen when I was
Mm.
tiny, and sitting on the front row, which you wanted to do at that age. Um, but the idea that there was something actually practical about it was new to me, and I remember starting to talk to people about it and subscribing to a lot of magazines because we didn't have the internet back then,
Mhm.
and VCRs started to come on the scene in my early teens, and I got a membership at the local video store, and I literally watched every movie I could get my hands on. I started watching, all the movies of particular actors or all the movies of a particular director. And I was raised in a very religious upbringing. And so it wasn't kosher for me to watch rated R
Mm.
movies. But when I got to be like 15, 16 years old, mom and dad were like, I was wanting to see Marty Scorsese's films. And I was and I remember this conversation at the dinner table, and my mom and dad were like, we've decided that because you're clearly passionate about this, that we're going to allow you to watch rated R movies, but your father is going to sit with you while you
Oh
watch
my
them,
God.
which is exactly the advice we're getting nowadays, when
Yeah.
our kids are on these internet. So my dad did that. My dad, thank God my mom and dad love movies. So my dad sat with me, and I mean, we have some really funny memories, the two of us, like some heavy duty sex scenes
I
where
was
my
gonna
dad would,
say,
yeah, where my dad would just be like, oh, you gotta close your eyes. I'm gonna fast forward scan through this. And it would be like Jane Fonda and John Boyton coming home. But
yeah.
it was all oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It was all cinephile stuff. I wasn't watching junk. I was watching, like, I had the list of all the movies that had won the Oscars, and I was only,
Hmm.
my way through it had been through watching the Academy Awards. So I was literally I happened to be watching those movies.
Yeah.
So when I graduated from college, I came out to LA. My brother was going to art school out here, so it worked out really well. I slept on his couch. I got a PA job at Disney and worked there a year and a half. And then just through, I always tell young people, just take the first job. Don't overthink it. Just get your foot in the door somewhere. It doesn't matter, because what will start to happen is that's when you'll start to meet people and network and go to screenings and go to events. And you really start to meet the people that you're going to click with. And I had met a woman, I had worked alongside her for several months, who had been Steven Spielberg's assistant on and off for, like 8 years. And she'd never been in what we call the hot seat. She'd been his second assistant, but he had contacted her saying, I really need to find a new first assistant. Do you have any ideas? And she called me. Would you be interested in interviewing with Steven Spielberg for an assistant job? And I said no, because I had just gotten a promotion at Disney and I loved my boss. I loved him, Sam Mercer, lovely man. You'll never hear a bad word said about him. And the guy I was working with in my office, my dear friend Jim Limley, came walking in and he's like, what was that? What did I just overhear? And I'm like, oh, that, Steven Spielberg's interviewing for an assistant and they wondered if I wanted to meet, but Sam just promoted me and I don't want to do that to Sam. And he was like, Bonnie, are you insane? He's like, Sam would tell you to go take that meeting. Like that just fell in your lap. You don't go, and this is great advice. Just go meet him. Like, it doesn't mean you're taking the job. It doesn't mean you're quitting. Like, you've already run through 8 steps that haven't even happened yet. Julie and I
she weren't meeting him in that first meeting. That's the funny part.
Well, yeah, exactly right. But Julie and I tell each other this all the time, and it's like, well, Julie actually says this, because I'll go into theory and Julie will be like, why don't we just make the phone call and see? Like, we don't even know. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what they're going to say to us. Oh, right. Reality. We're not in a movie. Right. So anyway, I went and met Kathleen Kennedy, who I adore and loved her. And we chatted about everything. And I came back to the office and I think I lied and said I was at a dentist appointment. And they called and offered me the job.
Wow.
And I said, well, don't I get to meet Steven? Now, keep in mind, I'm 23 years old at the time. My hair is like this big. I'm a Texan. I'm just like, the accent is thick. I'm ignorant as ignorance is bliss.
Bonnie, I didn't know the part about that you lied where you'd been. I thought you were going to tell Sam.
No, not for those first 2 interviews. No. I lied. And then I told him the truth.
Interesting. Yeah.
But he, and I really, at that point, my mindset at that point was that I wasn't doing it. My mindset at that point was, I'm going to do what Jim said. It is good advice. I'm going to go meet these people and I'm going to just see.
Just take the meeting. Yeah.
And there had been 2 other jobs on the lot that I had wanted and I'd gone and Sam knew about these job interviews and I didn't get the jobs. And I was convinced that Sam had called them and told them, I really still need her. Please don't give the job. One was with Liz Sayer. Julie. And I've told Sam and I've talked about all this, so I think I was in a mindset where I was like, if this is something I want to do, I probably shouldn't talk to Sam about it. So anyway, I went and met Kathy and then they offered me the job. I say, wait a minute, aren't I going to meet Steven? Well, we really don't do things like that around here. I'm like, okay, I love you. Great. All power to you, but I'm not going to work for a man I've never met. I don't know if I would say that today, by the way. I don't know.
What do you think gave you the gumption to say that back then? Was it?
Well, my mother, for lack of a better way to say it, I'd been raised on the phrase that you should never engage in a real way with somebody that you haven't met first. You never know who they're going to remind you of, and it wouldn't be their fault.
I mean, I think you still say that today. You would still say that today.
No, but I mean, there is a certain boldness in that. I think if I got an opportunity to work in some environment, I don't know if I think I would base my decision sometime on reputation. I don't think I would necessarily have to chemically be in the same room with someone, but boy, I felt that way back then. And it just came out of me. And I said, the reason I know it came from my upbringing is because I literally quoted my mother back to them and said, what if I remind him of some girl that broke his heart in high school? Direct quote from my mother. Or what if I don't like the way he smells? Direct quote from my mother. The pheromone thing. So it's all wrapped up in your upbringing. So so they were like, well, give us a second, we'll call you right back. So blah blah, they call me back. Okay, can you meet him? And they're in a whole covert operation on their side too, because there's still an assistant in the chair. So right. I got to go meet Steven on the back lot at Warner Brothers in this trailer on the set of Arachnophobia. Oh he and I are meeting for our secret date in this trailer. So I loved him from moment one. He's such a sweetheart.
What if he had smelled that? Would you have said, you know what, Steven, I'm all right? Or would you have just worked your way through it? Would you have just hinted at different deodorant types for him?
Thank God he does not smell bad, famously so. So I loved meeting him. It was just a lovely guy. So decent and respectful and kind and a good listener. And I really enjoyed chatting with him and making jokes with him. And so he
and professing your love for Kate Capshaw.
Well, that is actually why I got the job. Thank you. This is why it's good to have Julie around, because she remembers all my stories.
Bonnie's I loved hater.
I was not an out gay woman at the time. In fact, I didn't even know I was gay at the time. I didn't figure it out till I was like 25. But good Lord, did I love Kate Capshaw. I loved her. I had seen all her movies. Windy City, like this independent film she did, Space Camp, that I cried. So I'm doing all these quotes for Steven in this interview from Kate Capshaw movies. And he's like, oh my God, you are a huge fan. And I'm like, no, this is serious. I'm actually more excited to meet you because you're with Kate Capshaw than I am to meet you. Yeah. It was, I had him at hello, I think. So he hired me. He hired me and I started the gig. I went and talked to Sam. He's called me Benedict Arnold to this day. Lovingly so. And I started working for Steven a couple weeks later. And that was, and I say this in a positive way, it was baptism by fire, because it was literally 24 years old, thrown into just this uber experienced, brilliant machine of filmmaking. And you maybe know this much. And you're just you don't even know, it happens to me in hindsight. Julie and I will be encountering something on a film and I'll have this flash of a memory of something I went through that I observed. I didn't go through, I observed it on, Saving Private Ryan or so. And I know what people did. So I'm like, oh, well, we did that. And we'll be like, well, that might work. Let's try it. Yeah. So it was like a real tangible film school.
Yeah, it's because Bonnie just said take whatever the first job is, but I want to contradict that a little bit, because I know you have a lot of new producer types listening, right? That's a lot of your audience.
Yeah, there's this good blend.
Yeah, old people like us might not be listening, but
old people, please.
It's interesting.
Legends.
It's interesting because I think, Bonnie, I want to contradict something you said, because I do think the where is important. I don't think what the job. I agree with Bonnie that I don't think what the job you take is important as your first.
I agree with what she's
the about where to say. Is really important. And I tell a lot of new people who come for informational interviews or whatever, it doesn't matter if you're getting coffee. Just get the coffee as the best coffee getter has ever gotten coffee in the history of coffee getting, because that's where it is. And you will work your way up. If you're at a good place, you'll work your way up, because they'll start to trust you. We've hired a lot of people from internships, right? Yeah. Or gotten them from our internships to other great jobs elsewhere. They're scattered throughout the city now, right? But I do think the where is important, because I think it's hard to go from a crappy place to a great place, but it's much easier to go from a great place to another great place. So I do think the where is important. The other thing I will tell you, because Bonnie, went from being Steven's assistant to then when Kathy and Frank left, she really moved in and became Steven's producer for the second half of her time with him. But she tells a great assistant story that I'd love to make her tell. Sorry, Bonnie, because I think it just shows a certain tenacity that I think.
Is this the script cover?
It is. It is the script cover story, because I also think for people that are starting out, there's we see two strains of people that come through the doors, right? And we hire a lot of people, because even though it's just Bonnie and me and Lindsay, our assistant, when we're small, we get up and we have hundreds of people that work for us on a movie every time, and then it collapses back down, and then it's hundreds of people again, right? And we've even we've excused, not often, it's very rare for us to excuse someone or fire somebody, but we will if they aren't showing up for the rest of the team, right? Or of course, if they do something inappropriate. I did once fire somebody for sexual harassment. That's a longer story.
Well, that is understandable.
But there's a much broader scope of people that we wouldn't hire again if they don't show a certain tenacity. And I think we see a stream of people who come in who feel very entitled, like, what can you do for me in this job? Another stream of people that come in and they're like, how can I contribute to what this team is doing as a group? And those are two very distinct segments of people that we see coming through our doors now. It's really interesting. And Bonnie is always about the movie. So Bonnie, with that intro, you've got to tell the script page story.
Well, and I was raised to be all about the movie, which really worked in the way my psyche worked, because I'd been raised in religion, and there's always this sort of higher power situation going on. So
although
Steven would always
that
what
there are complications with that religious upbringing.
There are complications when you figure out your day and things like that, but but the concept of no, not what's best for that actor, no, not what's best for that that director even, or that scene, what's best for the movie as a whole, sort of that holistic. And no one, at the end of the day, no one can deny that if those are the decisions you're making. So
right,
unless they're jerks, and then you fire them. I'm kidding. But the story Julie's wanting me to tell you is we were making the movie Hook, and I had been working for Steven probably about a year and a half. The first year I worked for him, we didn't work on a movie. So I had heard going into it that it was all about his script. Like, Steven would make scribbles in his script. This is pre any of us having any digital life. He would make scribbles in his script. He would constantly leave his script sitting in the most random places, because he's inside his head thinking about the shot, and he would walk away. And as his assistant on set, and they said to me, this is going to sound crazy, but one of your most important jobs is making sure you know where his script is. I'm like, making sure I know where his script is? Like, how? And we'd had a couple of situations where he would accidentally leave it on set, and we'd have to get the stage unlocked to go get the script and get it back to him because he needed to prep for the next day, and his notes were in his script. So I started to grasp, I get it. He accidentally leaves it. It needs to be in his hands when he gets in his car at night. So I got to know the script very well. I got to know the scribbles. I got to know his notes. I began to run around and tell people, things he had scribbled. And it was sort of, I became his internet, I guess, in a way, and made sure, that everybody knew. So one night comes, and the script cover has just gotten trashed. I mean, he has spilt tea on it. It's got, stains. It's torn. It's barely hanging on by a thread. So I put a pristine, beautiful script cover on his script, and I throw away the old one. Cut to, and I send him home, and it's been a great day of shooting, So at about 2 a.m., my phone rings, And my answering machine picks up back in the day, and I wake up, and I hear his voice, and he's like, Bonnie, it's Steven. I know that everything's okay. I just want to say I know everything's okay, but you replaced my script cover. And I'm kind of superstitious about stuff like this. And it would be awesome if tomorrow morning, right when I show up, you replace the script cover. I know you wouldn't have thrown it away. I know you better than that, so it's totally, I'm going to sleep fine. Don't worry about me. I'm good. Which honestly, I think was a big give on his part, because I think in earlier days, he would have been like, get into the house now. But he was just like, it's all good. I'm good. And I'm like, oh no, I threw that thing away. What am I going to do? So, I mean, there was only one choice, and it was to go back to the movie lot, dig through the trash, and try to find the script cover. It never crossed my mind that I wouldn't do that. And so I got on my clothes, I drove up to the lot, and I knew most of the guards anyway, but they let me on, and we get to the trailer, and we find the hidden key, and we get in the trailer, and the trash has been taken away. And I'm just like, oh. And so the guy says, well, I can take you to where the trash is. And they don't pick it up until 5 a.m. So you've got, and I think at this point it was like 3 a.m. and he's like, so you've got some time. So he walks me, and I wish, I say to everyone, I wish so much I had a phone, an iPhone then, because I would have taken a picture of what I was about to do. And it was just this line of like 20 dumpsters along a soundstage. And I just hopped in. And I remember, I thought, I talked to him about where they pick them up and the order they go in. Like, I tried to be logical about it, but I knew I had 2 hours to go through 20 dumpsters. And I started digging, and I moved the trash bags around, and I cracked a few open if I saw a Dr. Pepper can, because that's my trash. And I'm just like, go, 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 go. And I used to know how many dumpsters I went through. It was only a few. Like, I got very lucky. And I came across this bag, and I saw a couple of things, including Dr. I'm like, oh my God, that's the bag. And I rip it open, and I find that script cover. And it's even worse now, because more stuff has spilled on it. It's wadded up. I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe this. And I have this image in my head of like, I wish someone had a camera again at the end of the dumpsters, because I literally leap up, like, like leap into frame, like,
by yourself.
By myself, a party.
Here's our intern hearing this story for the first time, and is
oh
like,
my God.
But that's how it should roll, right? That's how it should roll.
So I met him, and here's what I covered myself. Like, if I had been a healthier human, and that took years, but if I'd been a healthier human, I would have said to him when he pulled up that morning, you are never going to believe what I've been through to get this for you. I would have told him the story, but I didn't. What I did is I put it on his script cover. I was like, of course I didn't throw it away. Put it on his script. The day I knew you wouldn't. And and the only reason I'm telling you that part is I did tell him the truth. Like, a few years later, we were at dinner one night, and I was like, I have to tell you this story. And
what did he say?
He loved it. He told me that's why I'm a good producer. So,
okay, and what's the moral of the story, right? That's it right there. That's the moral of the story.
But you know what it is too? It's like, I think interns, people who get into the business, they think that it's like, then you were an assistant or you were an intern. It's just a title. It doesn't matter, right? Then eventually you become a producer, but the work ethic, like the integrity that you bring to the work, to your life, how you live your life, and that you bring to every task that you do, whether it's getting coffee or getting financing and everything in between, it should never change, and I try to tell people coming up, like you guys have said this beautifully, just do the thing well with a good attitude and with integrity. People will notice. It's really that simple. It's not hard. And so much of what we do can be learned, but it can't be taught. You have to just be the kind of person, like after doing so many of these interviews, I've learned that there is we share a patchwork of DNA. And I don't care where you've come from, how your journey has unfolded. There's always this commonality between the people that I have figured out. It is this ultimate sense of pride in who you are and what you do and the way you're going to show up, no matter what the task is. And those are the people that get pulled up. Those are the people that have luck and get that one job that is a turning point in their career and jump. And, then we spend a conversation like now looking back and unpacking how you got to this moment. But like you said, I would venture to say that how you handle that situation then and how you handle problems today, it's not very different. Maybe you wouldn't jump into the dumpster today, but you would.
Oh, I would be the first in. I would dare people to go in. That's to me, what's crazy is that's the fun to me. That's the fun part. That's to have the good story at the end of the day. But Julie Lynn, let's talk about your journey.
No, but I mean, Bonnie's trajectory is more interesting. I mean, I love it so much, and I never get tired of hearing her stories, because I think in the end, they're all about trust. All the stories are about trust. And, I think about our assistant, Lindsay, and the reason she's so great is that I trust her to do things that I wouldn't necessarily trust some senior executives we've met other places to do. Because the whole point of being part of a team is that you could walk away, something could happen and you'd have to walk away. You had an emergency or you got sick and the team could go forward and finish the game without you, right?
Yep.
That's what you want. You want to feel each other in that way. So I think it's all about trust. And if you can't be trusted to do the small things, then why would I trust you to do the big things? But if you can be trusted to do the small things, I'm super fast going to give you big things.
That's right.
It's also why sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's also why when we're interviewing assistants, I always look at their writing samples very, very carefully, because my assumption is going to be that we're going to want to trust that person to do some pretty advanced work. And so even though the first things they do as an assistant might not involve writing a letter or reaching out to someone on their own or writing notes or whatever it may be, I want them to be able to grow into my saying to them, oh yeah, you can deal with that person. You can write that letter. You can have that relationship. You can go represent us in that way.
Yeah.
But I only hire them if I see them having the capacity to grow in. It's why when people ask me, what should I study in college? I say, learn how to write.
I do the same thing, Julie. I'm like, people are like, there's not a film school at my university. I'm like, well, there wasn't one at mine either. Major in English or journalism. Just be able to write.
Or psychology, if you really want to take psychology. It a step further.
There is, even though we are in 2021, it is important to know how to write, whether you're writing a letter or an email. Texting is a whole nother thing. We don't have to touch on that, but there is still craft in how you articulate your thoughts and how you represent them to people outside your organization.
Yeah.
Whatever the format may be, or for us, whatever the platform may be, right? Because now we're platform agnostic. So,
right. Yeah, it's a very good point. I do want to, just because I'm mindful of time, I want to get to the part where you guys meet. You're meet cute, because you're clearly like cannot be separated. You're like joined at the hip, clearly, emotionally, energetically. You guys are close friends. You vacation together. You work together, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And it makes me a little like jealous, honestly, because, we all long to find partners in our lives, romantic partners, work partners, our work wives, work husbands, whatever. And what we do, you guys know this, it's so, oh God, it's all consuming. You're plugged into the matrix. It's like, you can't really unplug. And so to be on that journey with people that get that struggle and get the challenges from a deeper place than others who may want to support, but don't really understand why, having to dig through a trash can or a trash bin to find something for an artist is like do or die in that moment, right? And I think that's so important. And a lot of the advice I've been given by other women on how do you find longevity in this business, and all of them say you have to have a partner.
Yeah, it has to be the right partner, though. I mean,
And it's got
that's
to be the right partner. Exactly. So I want to
it,
know the meet cute for y'all, and then what it is about you both that seems to work so well in a partnership that here you are so many years later crushing it.
so I'm just minding my own business, doing my thing. I've been making movies for a long time, mostly small movies that you can hold in the palm of your hand, but beautiful, and I'm proud of them. And I get a call one day from Bonnie Curtis. Like, why is Steven Spielberg's producer calling me? But okay. And I always call everybody back. So I'm like, I'm calling her back. And she was calling. Bonnie, you tell this part, because you tell about Michelle Venitas. You tell this part, and then I'll chime in later.
Well, I had just had lunch with a AD that Julie and I both worked with, a woman named Michelle Venitas, and we're friends. We were just having lunch together, and I was expressing to her that I was really wanting to get into the world of making these smaller, more character-driven films, the films that I had grown up loving and wanting to make. And here I had, just by circumstance, although gratefully and wonderfully so, fallen into this world of huge tentpole movies about dinosaurs in World War II. And as much as I love Steven, and I do to this day, I really wanted to get my hands on different kinds of movies. And she got it. And she was like, I have someone you should meet. She's done, these smaller movies. And I think Michelle's the one that gave me the quote, this woman's basically been making movies out of her kitchen. And I knew Julie's movies. I loved, Julie had done a movie called 9 Lives that I literally was my favorite movie of the last year. So it was like that's exactly like, and I don't know if you've seen 9 Lives, but it's a very experimental film. So they had all these huge actors, but they were trying this really brave experiment, and you should go look it up and watch it. But I was like, I'm game. Yeah. What's her number? So Michelle texted me her number, and I called Julie that afternoon. Okay, there you go, Julie.
So we met at Le Pan Quotidien. We know the table. I walked by it yesterday, and I'm so sad because it's all boarded up, because it's the place where the romance, the work romance started. And we met and talked, and we found out that we liked a lot of the same material, and we really vibed. And apparently I offered to share a low budget with Bonnie and dropped it off at her house on my way out of town. I didn't remember it till a long time later when she showed it to me with my scrawl on top of it. But apparently Doug, my husband, and I had dropped it off. And that was kind of it. We weren't like in close touch. We just had really enjoyed it. And then Rodrigo Garcia, who's a producer, who's a director I've made a lot of movies with. In fact, we're getting ready. That's the Virginia movie we're about to make, is with him. He called me one day and he said, look, Glenn Close, who we had both worked with before, has asked me to direct this movie that is her longtime passion project. It already has a producer. And I'm like, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm like, who is it? And he said, it's Bonnie Curtis. And I said, oh, well, you're in great hands. You're going to have a great time. Please don't fall in love with her more than you love me. But yeah, so have a great time. Call me if you need me. And this really was Glenn's passion project. Like, she had handed it to Bonnie saying, this is the movie I need to make before I die. Right. Yeah. And so over a couple years, they would call me. They would be going out to an actor that I would know or something, and I would make a phone call, and it just hadn't quite clicked, so it can take a long time to get a movie made. Yeah. And one day Rodrigo calls me and says, Bonnie and Glenn are going to call you and ask you to produce the movie with them. Say yes. So it was actually Bonnie called me, and I said yes. And it was interesting because Bonnie at the time thought that they needed the director's producer in order to get the movie made, which is not true, because as that same Michelle Venitas said, Rodrigo could work with a pony and get anything done. Like, he's very efficient. But I think it was just they hadn't fully walked through that financing it from scratch, which is a very scrappy process. Yeah.
And so different than studio filmmaking.
Very, very
just literally a foreign language.
So we made that movie, and we sort of, we got one domino and then another domino, and we could fill a whole hour with stories on how we got Albert Nobbs. And let me tell you, it could be.
I wish we had a 6-hour series
but
now with you guys.
We don't, but
so much.
but we, suffice it to say, we got the movie made, and Bonnie and I realized not far into it that kind of we're the primary work relationship. Like all of our directors aside, like it's us, and we both know the exact moment. We were walking from our little cold 3-banger with no electricity back to the set. And I looked at her and she looked at me, and I was like, you want to read something else? And she's like, yeah. And that's it. We haven't made a movie. We have a saying in our partnership, which is without you dead. And I think I would have to find something else to do at this point. I mean, I was on my own for so long. You have partners on different movies, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
That I've made Bonnie talk to me about how when we're done making movies, like what's the nonprofit thing that we're going to figure out to solve together?
Yes.
Because the joy, it's not just without you dead, but it decreases the stress, but it also raises the joy by so much. There's another great story, which if you have 2 minutes, I can tell you, which is,
of course,
when Bonnie and I were trying to get our second movie made. We have a trip to go to New York, right? And because we're trying to raise money in New York, because New York is full of people with a lot of money. I don't actually think we raised any money on that trip, but maybe we got to somebody who got us to somebody who got us to somebody.
We got, yep.
Right? We got to somebody who got us to somebody. So we're getting ready to make the trip. And I'm like, so we're going to stay in my friends, David and Sarah have a spare apartment in New York. We're going to stay there. There may be somebody in the bedroom. So you and I may have to share a bedroom. And Bonnie said, oh, I got to ask Kim. And I'm like, what? And she's like, Julie, I have to ask Kim before I share a bed with another woman. I'm a lesbian. And I was like,
and
okay.
it wasn't ask, it was tell.
It was tell. Sorry.
Yeah.
Tell.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
she's like,
I knew she'd be fine, but I couldn't do it and not
right. So she's like, I told Kim, and it's fine. She said to tell you this and this, which I won't say in a recording. And I was like, well, then I'm going to ask Doug. So I go to my husband.
You get to tell your spouse, I get to tell mine.
Right. So I'm like, honey, I might be sharing a bed with Bonnie the lesbian. Doug says, because Doug understands how deeply my life has changed since Bonnie's come, right? Like I don't get as scared, like if I'm going to talk to a mean agent, because then she's just going to be, oh, he's in blah, blah, blah. And I'm having so much more fun and life is just so good. And he just looks me right in the eye and he says, honey, whatever you need to do to keep Bonnie happy, you just do that. And that was the end of it. And we went to New York.
And ended up not sharing a bedroom.
And ended up not sharing a bed. But Doug was down with whatever happened in bed.
Yeah.
Was still going to be my my producing partner.
Well,
and I came back with a good story to tell.
Well, I'm so curious because you were saying Bonnie's origin story is more interesting than yours, but I disagree politely. I think that you guys are two pieces of a whole, and without your experiences and your perspectives to come together, maybe it wouldn't have been the right partnership, right? So everything led you to that moment where you could have shown up for her as what she needed as well for you guys to create this beautiful partnership.
Julie?
So don't underplay your value in this beautiful partnership. I feel like I'm your therapist. But no, I want to say, because you started in law and then you found filmmaking, you found producing, and then you went about it the harder of the paths, which is to do it by yourself, to do it on the indie way, which I can't even imagine how much harder it was when you started before digital was really had blown up, so it's tremendous. And I hope you recognize that you withered a really tumultuous time of transition in the industry for independent filmmaking to withstand the test of time, to then get to a place where you could find a partner who brought a completely different perspective into the work. But so you must have, I'm curious how before Bonnie entered your life, you weathered that time, because as someone, and I ask this because as someone who has been an independent film producer my whole life, who've come, I came up in the production side of things. I didn't know anyone. I had to learn everything I've done, every single credit I've earned. I've had to work my ass off for it. Nothing's been handed to me. And as a freelancer, what is often resulted in is your self-worth then starts to become attached to the work. And I have had a long undoing of that so that I don't go through depression and ups and downs. And especially when you don't have someone to share that with, right? If you don't go, oh my gosh, is this normal? Does anyone else feel this? Like, am I crazy? Why am I doing this? You know, these existential mini crises, which I have still very regularly. And I think that part of the process of the journey is very important, because everyone I talk to has that, no matter how successful they are or what they've achieved. And weathering that, you know, understanding how to navigate those ups and downs, for me is like what I'm like addicted to, like knowing how people find their way through, you know, not that you ever get to one side and it's just like paradise, it's just easy, the doors of Hollywood, just, you know, open sesame.
No, it isn't.
It's always challenging, but I guess my very long-winded way to ask, you know, now you must have different tools for it, I would imagine, but back then, you know, how did you keep going? What kept you going to get to that stage?
I think I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
I think I did. I mean, I can speak to you in terms of, let me say a couple things about that. It's such a great question. And I have been there. I have been in that it was scrappy and it was hard. And it almost felt like I willed those movies into existence in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I can say a couple things to maybe help you. I mean, you're a little maybe past that now, but help the folks who are, you know, coming up behind. I would say one is, if you don't have a producers group, make a producers group. I didn't have mine till much later. I think a little bit before Bonnie and I met, maybe. I'd have to go back and look and see how long it's been. But I have a wonderful producers group, and Bonnie's now a part of it, because for a long time they were like, ask Bonnie, or Bonnie would be like, ask your producers group. And finally they're all like, can Bonnie just be in can we just grandfather her in the producers group?
Yeah.
But we are a group of about 20 producers, all of whom we trust each other completely. And we are vulnerable with each other, and we are there for each other. There is no schadenfreude. It is completely supportive. And we have a listserv. And we try to get together when we can get together and have lunch or have a retreat, but we are constantly there for each other. Guys, I need to get to this actor. Who knows the agent, or who knows who runs their production company? Or guys, my craft service person just quit. I need a new person right away. Or guys, I'm in a legal quandary. I don't understand how to make this deal work. We're just completely there for each other. I really recommend making a community like that, even if you don't have a producing partner. I think that's incredibly helpful. And the other thing I would say is, when you're starting out, I kept my nut really small. You know, Doug and I lived in a tiny little 1-bedroom apartment with our big German Shepherd for a long time. We lived there for a long time, about a decade. And that helped ease the stress. In other words, I didn't overextend. He was finishing up his PhD and starting teaching, and I was doing these tiny little movies, and I would just have to take jobs that, you know, I logged tapes at the AFI for the 100 greatest this or 100 greatest that movies, or that same Kathy Kennedy, after she met me working on a public service announcement, offered me a job producing the horse races for Seabiscuit, right? Which wasn't producing a whole movie, but it was certainly producing a segment of a movie. Kathy, to this day, feels that she is spiritually responsible for putting me and Bonnie together, because she raised us both. And we both adore her. And, you know, I took jobs for different reasons than I would take them today. You know, I took jobs to learn something and to keep going in my chosen profession while I was trying to get my own movies going, right? So that I could keep going, and I didn't overextend or owe a lot of money or live in a place that was too big. Do you know what I mean? I really, because I needed to be able to have the flexibility to say, okay, I'm going to do this movie and take no fee, which we're trying to help other producers not have to do now by forming a producers union. But
yes, I'm a part of that.
Yeah. So we're really trying to help the younger generation coming up, because it's not a sustainable way to live.
Yeah.
But I just try to keep my flexibility so that I would take some jobs for money so that I can continue to do what I love, even without getting paid, because I've given up producer's fee, partially or completely, on a lot of movies that I've loved. And it was,
Right.
from my perspective, it was the way to give the director what they wanted, you know?
Yeah.
But it was hard. And it can be lonely for sure.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to make community on each movie. You have to make community with your directors. You have to make community with other producers. And then, you know, if you are a very fortunate human being, as I have been, at some point in your travels, you will meet the person who is the right chemical match to be your producing partner. And that is a game changer, because one of us is always available to step into the breach, right? The start of this interview was a great example. I knew I was going to be 3 minutes late because that agent called me at 9:59, and I knew I had to take that call because she's 8 hours ahead in London, right?
Yep.
And I was like, I can't talk to you long, but I knew Bonnie was here, right? And I knew you had Bonnie. So, and it happens in much grander ways. And I know there's things that she's way better at than I am, like handling a very diva-esque human. You want to send Bonnie in because her mother trained her to do that. And when the legal documents come through to us, she just hits delete because she figures I'm going to take care of it. So I
don't hit delete. I look at it and go, what in the world is this saying? And then I file it and I hope Julie will deal with it.
And I do. But Caroline, I think the most interesting thing about our partnership is actually there are partners who really divide, like one does one thing and one does the other, or they really like one takes one movie and one takes the other movie. We have a number of friends who are very successful producing partnerships by doing that. That is not how we roll. We are at our happiest when we are making a movie together. And on Albert, and then things will just naturally occur. Like on Albert Nobbs, Bonnie said to me, so they want to do a press conference and we want to maybe release a photo early. And are you cool if I handle that? And I was like, are you kidding me? Please handle that. And she said, great. You go back to set where you seem to know everybody's name. Just you go do that.
Right.
And to this day, Bonnie will often be in at base camp with the second AD looking at the next day's work, because for her, watching take after take for take is like watching paint dry. And she's like, oh, I'll catch up on dailies. But she's doing the incredibly important work of looking at what's ahead tomorrow that we have to be ready for. Whereas watching dailies makes me want to slit my wrists and drink my own blood because it's too late to do anything about it. Right.
Right.
It's too late to get the take or the coverage that you didn't.
Yeah.
But I think one of the secrets to the happiness factor of our partnership is I actually like doing that part. Like I love planning the next week and the next day. I don't like, I mean, you touched on, I'm just reiterating. So when Julie's not there, unfortunately, I have to do half a dozen things that I don't like doing, that I don't enjoy, that don't bring me joy, and I don't know if they bring Julie joy, but however she's wired, that's where she wants to be. She's where she wants to be, or constitute, like she's in good, that this is where I want to be, where I need to be, where I find my worth. I need to be here. And I'm like, thank God, because that drives me friggin' nuts. I'm going to be over here. And, you know, we are sort of whatever our upbringing is, what we learned. You don't really need to be on set with Steven Spielberg. He's kind of got it under control.
Yeah.
So I found my worth with him in being ahead. Like I got a lot of attagirls for thinking ahead for him because he didn't have time. He was too immersed. So, and Kathy Kennedy's the person that taught me how to do that. Kathy literally took me at her side and taught me how to produce for him, because every director is different. I don't think you ever produce the same way twice. Every director is different.
Really don't. And I was starting a lot of first-time directors, not all of them, not Rodrigo, but a lot of the others. Virtually everybody else was a first-time director, and so the best thing to be for them was a bit more of a presence and a bit more of support, while still jockeying and figuring out how to do the day ahead, right? So it is interesting. It's also, there's a lot we love doing together and we have fun together. You know, casting is a great example. We both love the casting process with the directors. But what Bonnie said is very clear, and Kathy Kennedy is a great example of this, is that you don't produce a certain way and expect the director to come and cotton to the way you produce. I think although there are producers that are probably very successful in doing that, the way that Bonnie and I think about it is you look to we're director driven producers, right? So you look to the director you have and you think, what is the best way for me to make their best environment for them to do their best work? And then you shift based on that.
That's brilliant. I mean, do you find that the younger generation coming up, to the note that you said earlier, that there's like, it feels like there's two camps. There's this attitude of entitlement a little bit. I don't know if it's a younger generation thing, but you know, the people that are coming into the field, and then there are the people that are like, I'm just here, I'm happy to help. How do I help? What do I do? Whatever you need. So there's this question often of like, how do I find my producer? If you're a filmmaker, if you're starting out, how do I find? And I always say, you can't just, it's not just a producer. Like you can't just go and find any producer. It's like a very delicate balance of a marriage between two people energetically. And you have to find your other half, like even if it's temporarily, and even if that means that you learn in that experience that this wasn't your half, you know, but there's this desperation sometimes I feel to be like, well, I just gotta find this and I just gotta find that people don't take the time to figure out what they really need from the filmmaker side, it seems. So I'm just curious if you have that impression, I guess, from the younger people coming up, that there's this potentially an entitlement and a frenziness to go because the world feels so much faster now with social media. And you made a movie and it's like, great, your movie's barely come out, they're like, what are you doing next? Like, it's just, everything moves so quickly that I wonder if it creates this frenzy that doesn't allow the time and the process that is required to develop that within yourself, to know what you need as an artist or as a producer who collaborates with an artist. And I wonder if that is either like if it's a cause, or what is it that is, I guess, what am I trying to say? Like if that is part of the reason, or if that is a byproduct of the environment, I guess, for the people coming in who maybe enter it from that other side, who don't see that just yet so clearly.
I think people are people. And so I'm sure there are just as many entitled typey people our age coming up. A lot of them, there were more of them that were men, I think, than women. And I think some of the difference now is actually a good difference, which is, and I want to be clear about this, because I don't want to be like the doctor who's like, well, you have to have the internship where you stay up 12 nights in a row because that's what I did. Like, right. I don't necessarily think that everything we had to go through coming up, people should have to go through. I do think a producer should be paid a living wage. And I don't think the fact that I maybe did a bunch of movies in a row without getting paid is I don't think people should feel like, I don't feel that people should have to go through that. Right. And I'm glad that there's more awareness now of the fact that we have big roads, big strides that we still need to make in terms of diversity and things like that. I think these are good things to question and not just have people do things the same way they've always done them. Yeah. So I think that issue aside, I do agree with you that I think it is both harder and easier now. The way that is harder is exactly what you said, which is everything under a microscope. It's very hard to make a mistake without it killing you, because everybody's in touch with everybody. If I had a dime for every mistake I've made, I could finance all our movies, right? I think it's really important if you're a young person coming up, and I say this to our intern Zoe all the time, if I pivot over to her, like, to be in a safe place to make a mistake, right? We've talked about that, right? Like, I think it's good to have mentors and bosses where if you make a mistake, it's a teaching moment rather than yeah, exactly. Yeah. Rather than to have you hung out to dry so I think all of that being under a microscope all the time and everybody being in a rush and everybody in frenzy, I think it does make it harder for people coming up. On the other hand, there are so many other ways to get your movie made and show your movie. When we were starting, you had to have a lot of very expensive equipment that was in pretty short supply in order to make a movie.
Yeah.
You couldn't make a commercially distributed movie on an iPhone because iPhones did not exist. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So it was really a métier where you needed to go out and put together a full-on movie and get financing it for it to get at that slot to get it done. Whereas I think one of the beautiful things for people coming up is that if they are talented, if they have access to a great script and somebody who can direct that script right onto the screen, maybe that's the same person, or maybe it's two different people, you can make that movie.
Yeah.
You can. And if the movie is good, it will be seen. There's no excuse of, oh, I'm an undiscovered genius. No. If you write a great script, somebody will find that script. If you are a great director, somebody will see your work. I think it is hard to lay claim to being an undiscovered genius anymore, because there are just many ways. You're not waiting for somebody to hand you that camera in the way that you might have been before. Yeah. So I think the 21st century gives and the 21st century takes away. And I do think, and this is another answer to your question about the frenzy, is that people who can take a breath and think not about just the option that's right in front of them, but all the tributaries that may spread out before them, may make the best decisions in the long run. Right?
Yeah. I would agree. The breath. I mean, yoga changed my life. It was the thing. I know it sounds silly,
it's
right? But it's true. It's like the ability to slow down and be present for what's here, and showing up and doing the best you can in that moment. That's why I think yoga, it's a practice. And for me, it became such a metaphor for my own career and for the longevity that I want to have, right? I don't want to burn out in the things that I'm doing, in the same way that I don't want to go beyond what my body can do in a certain yoga pose and then get injured and have to not do something for 2 years. So if you can be aware of showing up with what you have that day to give and doing your best, and really, when you go to sleep at night, trust that you actually did your best. You showed up and did the best you could with all the things that were on your plate that day. I think that's all any of us really have. And when I understood that concept, like in my mid-20s, it was game changer for me, because it also demystified the industry a bit. And it just was like, oh, these are all just like humans like me, who are imperfect, who are trying to figure it out, who don't have the answers, who all have unique paths and unique things that they bring into the work. It isn't this like distant gate. I don't know. It just always felt like this palace, especially as an immigrant coming to this country. I feel like so much of all the things that have transpired for me to get to be here and do the work that I do, I take so seriously. And the amount of mountains that had to move and shift for me to be here. So when I get into my cycles of frustrations or that frenzy, it's the breath of just like, but what is here now? What can I do today? How can I show up right now? Like, I don't have this today, but I have this. Can I do the best I can today with this? And it really shifted things. And I venture to say that having that ability to step back, in fact, it helps you, because it starts to attract the kinds of people as well in the business who also vibrate at that frequency. And so you tend to find your tribe a little more quickly, because you're plugged into what is important to you, I know a lot of people that, came up with me 15 years ago and are always somehow stuck in a certain rung of the business, doing and collaborating with certain people that I'm like, oh, like they have a bad reputation. Like, you didn't outgrow that. Like, it's interesting to me. I find it curious, and I do think that that's a part of it. Like, I always say that the person you are in your life should never be separate from how you're going to show up on a set or in a room to meet with some high and mighty Hollywood person. Like, it should be that sense of integrity should always be there, but it takes a journey for some people to find out what that is for themselves.
Well, and that's to take it back, that's what I was trying to say earlier when I was saying that ignorance is bliss. the young me at age 23, that I was just connecting on a human level with the Spielberg offer. I didn't have all the experiences I have now that can sometimes make me wake up and be cynical, or make me wake up and be, judgmental, or all these things. I've been reading a lot of articles lately about how we really need to listen to our children, because they are functioning in life on an instinctual level. They don't have all the noise in their head that we as adults have. And it makes so much sense to me. So you both have made me think of two quick things in this soup. One is, we're not curing cancer. We're making entertainment. So that mindfulness that you're talking about, I also equate with just how unimportant what I'm doing is. And it can give people beautiful ideas, and it can change people's lives. It did for me. There are films that changed my life. And that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful if I can bring my authentic self to a work experience that in turn gives someone some sort of powerful personal experience. That would be great. And in a way, that does give me personally the right mindset to be in when I'm doing something. I'm not trying to, well, I am trying to make people money because we do want to keep doing it. But
yes.
I'm not putting that weight on myself, because I'm not worried if it makes money at the box office. I really hope it does. But I can't worry about that, because I'm just here in this little sandbox trying to make a good movie that's going to entertain somebody like me. And then the other thing that I really keep thinking about listening to you guys talk is, one mistake that I see a lot of young people make is, and I think you'll get how this ties to what we're saying, is they really want to get mired in these huge legal negotiations with tons of paperwork before they engage on a project with people, before they engage with a writer, or before they engage with a producer, or before they engage with a director or an actor. They're literally throwing roadblocks up in front of themselves before they've even started. And I always say, I've had so many people call me and be like, can you look at this contract for me? Because I have this script and I really wanted to do this, but I want to make sure I protect it. And I sure, send it to me. And 9 times out of 10, I call back and say, well, I wouldn't do anything, because if these people are going to be disingenuous and, betray you, you don't want to be in business with them anyway. Right. So I, it really is akin to sort of finding like-minded people, and people that, like you were saying, that are in the same vibration that you are. I totally agree with that.
I will say that the vast majority of the filmmakers that Bonnie and I work with, we don't exchange any paperwork until.
And that's from a lawyer. Listen to her.
Until it's time for principal photography. It's different if you're optioning a book that you then have,
of course, it's on the marketplace.
But in terms of our writer directors, no, because the trust is deep. And Bonnie's right. If they're gonna screw us, then okay.
The trust has to be deep. Even if it isn't, it actually has to be. So if it isn't, you need to find out. And things go so sour so quickly when you start putting all that paperwork in the way. So I really encourage leap of faith. I'm a big believer in leap of faith.
Yeah, agreed. And we're right back to that first thing, which is maybe the great place to end it, which is we're back to trust, right?
Yeah.
So I had the same thought.
Learning through the experience of walking through a process with somebody who you can trust, and hopefully yourself being trustworthy, is you will find the people to make a career with and to make a life with.
I love that.
Yeah. And we walked through, because I do want to just say quickly, we walked through an experience with the people at Skydance Media. Julie and I made a movie with them called Life a few years ago. And just like Julie and I walked through the Albert Nobbs experience together, and we're like, we should do this again. We walked through the Life experience with the people at Skydance, with David Ellison and Dana Goldberg and Don Granger. And we were like, we should do this again, and it through that experience, we knew, okay, this works. So slowing down and letting the experience happen, not throwing up roadblocks, slowing down and letting the experience happen. And then at the end of that, looking at each other and saying, okay, what could this be? Yeah. Instead of all that formalizing and all that, frenetic, let's define it now. Let's define it now. Let's define it now. I promise you, you don't know yet. I didn't know I was gay till I was 25. You don't know.
Well,
you don't know, Julie.
I have a quick lightning round of 5 quick questions I've started asking. So you guys can either just take turns answering them, or you can both answer each question, and then I'll wrap it up. But
Let's go. We'll take
okay.
the ones that we need, and then I do have to go.
And so you guys have to hop. Okay. What is a song that teleports you to a happy place?
Top of the World by Karen Carpenter.
Okay. Last piece of art that moved you, a book, film, show?
Oh, Ted Lasso.
Agree. Okay, fill in the blank. When I'm overworked, blank helps ease the stress.
Chocolate.
What is one of the most worthwhile investments you've ever made? And it doesn't have to be financial.
My daughter.
Yeah, children. I mean, why would we even ask that question? I have my daughter and my son.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. And then this is a personal favorite question. Inside the Actor Studio was a show that inspired me a lot coming up. So I like to borrow that question from the famed French journalist Bernard Pivot. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You can eat all the Lucky Charms, macaroni and cheese, and Dr. Pepper that you want and never gain a pound.
I love it.
Julie, be more poetic than me.
I see.
You're gay? Come in.
No, sorry. No. Have you seen my husband? There's no way I could be gay. I see you, and I see that even when you failed, you were trying your best, and it's okay.
That's beautiful.
I don't like Dr. Pepper, so that's mine.
I want him to tell me I'm funny. Him or her, by the way.
Probably her, but
yeah, they. I want them to tell me I'm funny. And I do want to be able to eat all the macaroni and cheese I
think you will.
without getting a stomach ache.
Oh, you have that now.
Wait,
pound. It's the worst.
Wait, no. I know what I want them to say to me. I want them to say, Karen Carpenter's right over there, and she wants to give you a personal concert.
Okay, goodbye. I gotta go.
Thank you, ladies. This is so amazing. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having us, Carolina.
Thank you, Carolina.
What you do next. Let's wait. I can't wait to see what you do next.